Hello and welcome to another video from ArcGIS Associates, now part of the Davie Resource Group. So for those of us that have been using GIS software for a long time, how much time does it take you to really get a layer configured in a map, right? Setting up the symbology, establishing the labeling settings, applying a definition query, configuring scale ranges and so on, right? How much time does that really take? Well, depending on the complexity of the layer, it can take a very long time to do. And then if you want to use that layer in another map, to go back and reconfigure all those settings manually can take, just as long, sometimes longer, depending on the situation. So what we want to do in this video is talk about how you can use layer files to standardize those settings across multiple maps, share those settings so others can use them in maps they create, so you can then make sure everybody's using the same thing across your organization. We'll talk about how this works in ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. So let's go take a look. We're going to start by talking about what exactly is a layer file. Well, a layer file is a file, as the name would indicate, that you create that stores all of the settings for the properties of a layer. So when you right click on a layer, whether in ArcMap or in ArcGIS Pro, and you go down to properties and you open up either the layer properties window, layer properties pane, all those various tabs that are in there for symbology, labeling, scale ranges, and so on are part of what a layer file can store. So anything you configure for a layer can be set or stored in the layer file. But this also includes things like feature templates. The feature templates you use when editing to create a new feature in a map. And I have a video that talks about feature templates that I'll try to put a link in, if nothing else, to the description, but I'll try to insert one right here. So anything that's really associated with that layer and how it's configured is stored as part of the layer file. And what this allows you to do is once you've configured a layer in one map, got everything set up, all of those things, scale ranges, label settings, symbology, your feature templates configured, your field visibility settings configured, you name it, all of those various property settings get saved in that file so that when you want to go add that layer either into the map you're working in or a new map in a new project or a new MXD file, whatever, you can point to that layer file instead of going directly to the feature class in the geodatabase or the shape file or whatever it is, and add the layer file to the map, and then all of those settings come in already configured. You don't have to manually go back and reset all those. So this really can reduce the amount of time it takes you to produce new maps. It also allows you to standardize settings for certain layers across your entire organization. So everybody is using the same color palettes, the same label settings, the same visibility ranges. And this can be very important for a number of reasons. For example, if you're working with a legal layer like the zoning layer, you want to make sure all of the proper zoning classes are called out. They all have the same color or fill pattern assigned to them so that that is standard across your organization. If you're publishing maps to the web and you have a standard tiling structure and things that you like to do with it, then having specific scale ranges that certain layers appear and disappear within that web map is important. So you'd want to make sure that's standardized. So there's a lot of reasons to use the layer file. And this works both in ArcMap and in ArcGIS Pro. If you create a layer file in ArcMap, it's going to have an LYR file extension. If you create one in ArcGIS Pro, it's going to have an LYRX file extension. Now, layer files created in ArcMap will work both in ArcMap and in the newer ArcGIS Pro. However, layer files created in ArcPro are not going to work in ArcMap. So anything created in ArcMap can also work in ArcPro, but things created in ArcPro won't typically work in ArcMap. So that's something to keep in mind if you're in a shop that is using both still. So let's, again, go in, created an ArcMap, and see the stuff in action. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a demonstration. I'll start in ArcMap. So that's something important to keep in mind. Even though it's the older software as you're for Esri, as far starting as to use layer files. I think most of the user base. I know a lot of organizations will have a folder on. Then we'll also jump into ArcPro and show you how file server on their network. That application as well. Everybody they're very similar. Esri software very little difference, so they can just use layer files and the principle is exactly the same. It's just database. Make sure you know where the buttons and things are. The shape files or we'll do that. So let's go ahead and jump into ArcMap and show you how one you create a layer file. If that's what you do, then again, how you need to make sure that the layer files you're creating are going to work with whatever software your organization is using. So as you can see now, we're here in ArcMap, and I've already gone ahead and started working on a layer. I've got this zoning layer. So this is the wonderful city of Trippville, which if anybody's taken any of our training classes or worked through my Learning ArcGIS Pro book or the ArcGIS Pro 2.x cookbook are familiar with. So as you can see, this layer is already being symbolized by the zoning classifications, and there's a pretty good number of these. And they have some pretty complex symbology associated with it. You know, you can see some are solid fills, some are striped fills, some have multiple colors in the striped fill pattern in there. So as you can imagine, setting this up from scratch takes a good bit of time. It probably took me a good 30 minutes to get this set up from scratch at the beginning. So getting that all done. But I want to take a quick moment here and look at some of the other layer properties that get saved when we create a layer file. So I'm just going to right click on the layer, go to properties. So that will open the layer properties window here. And all of these tabs are various settings that you can configure for any layer that's in your map that do get saved as part of that layer file. So if I go in and set up, you know, a description, so let's see. Put that in, credits, you know. In here. Then if I want to set scale ranges, right? So when does this appear? You know, again, if I'm going to publish this out to the web, it's important to set these ranges so that I get optimum performance when folks are looking at this map in the web. If I'm just going to print it, it doesn't really matter. If I'm just going to be working in ArcMap, depending on the number of layers I'm working with, it may not matter. But I'm just going to go ahead and set it up just so you can see how this carries across. So I'm going to do not show this layer when zoomed out beyond, say, we're going to go ahead and use the current scale. So you can see the current scale is up here, so 1 to 20,000. So when I go out beyond that, it's not going to show that layer. Source, where is the data pulling from? So this is another property. You should always remember that a layer in a map doesn't store the data it displays. It references that data, right? So here we can see that this particular layer is pointing to the Trippville_GIS geodatabase and to the zoning, right there, zoning feature class, which is a simple polygon feature class. It doesn't have any Z values or M values, and it's in the Georgia State Plane NAT83 coordinate system. So that is important to note because a layer is associated with a specific feature class or a shapefile or a CAD file or something along those lines. And so when I create the layer file, it's also going to be associated with this source because that's a property of the layer. So that's an important thing to remember. Okay, so we go on selection. Do I want it to have a certain symbol when I select it? So I will change this just again to show you how this carries across. So I changed the outline color. So whenever I select a feature in this layer, it's going to look like that. Display settings. So if I have a transparency that I want to apply, turn on map tips. so that when I put my mouse over it, it shows some piece of information. I'm not going to make any changes here. So again, we've already got our symbology set up, so I don't have to go back through and do all that. So I'll leave that. Field. So field visibility. Do I want to see aliases? So I'm going to go ahead and turn off some, because object ID, that's something the software controls. I don't need to see it. A shape, I know it's a polygon. There's another object ID showing that this had to be imported from some other location. PIN, which is the parcel identifier number or identification number. I'm going to leave that on. Land district and land lot. That's here in Georgia. We don't have the public land system. So in most of the state that's not near the coast, we locate parcels based on their district and land lot that they happen to be in. So leave that on. The lot number, deeded acres. Yep. I'm going to leave the rest of these on. I'm just going to turn those off. That's good. I'm not going to apply a definition query, but that's another property. Label settings. So sure, let me go ahead and label each of these parcels. Label them all the same way. I'm going to label them with their zoning, zoning class, which is in this field. I'm going to actually set a different scale range to this. So we had this one at 1 to 20,000. We're going to make do not show labels when zoomed out beyond, say half of that, we're at 10,000. So again, apply that in there. I'm not going to do any joins or relates, but that's where we link to other tables for the layer. That is also a property of the layer, which would be saved as part of the layer file. I'm not going to enable time because I don't have any timestamps, but if I actually had like when a parcel got zoned a certain thing within the table, I can enable that, which then I could do a time series on it. And then my HTML pop-up. So again, assuming I may eventually publish this to the web, I would want to enable the HTML pop-up. So that's when you go to a web map like in ArcGIS Online, that when you identify something, that's going to pop up. So I'm going to save all those just by clicking OK. I could hit apply. That would apply the settings, but then leave this window open. I don't need to leave the window open, so I'm going to hit OK, which applies it and closes the window. Okay. So I've now configured all of those obvious properties for the layer. There is one other property for the layer that I want to configure, and part of that is the feature templates. So in ArcMap, to get to the feature templates, I'm going to start my edit session. So I go to the editor toolbar up here. If you don't have that turned on, let's see here, this button right here, so where your scale is here, this button here will turn the editor toolbar on and off. Okay, so now I'm in an edit session and I click on this button over here where it says create features. This opens the create features window, as you can see here. These are the feature templates for this layer. Feature templates are a property of the layer. So if I want to go in and make changes to the properties of these templates, that would be associated with the layer. So for example, with Essential Business District, I want to open the properties for that feature template. And so give it a description. It's a special commercial area. If I have certain things, so I know that I am the only one that should be making edits to things in the Central Business District because I'm the planning specialist assigned to that. I can go ahead and set my editor in as me, right? So I can go ahead and define any default values for the fields that would go with that. I can also control which editing tools I use by default for that. I'm going to hit OK. So I'm just going to make that change to that one. I'm not going to, the others would work the same way. I'm just going to make that change to that. So I've gone through, configured all the properties for the layer that I want or need to for this map. But I know I'm going to want to use the same layer in other maps. So I'm going to create that layer file. So I'm going to go ahead and close the create features window. I'm going to stop my edit session. Go ahead and save my map just because I have made some changes to some settings. I want to make sure those stay. So now just go over to the layer, right click on it, and down here is save as layer file. I'm going to create that layer file, choose where I'm going to save it to. So first I'm going to go look in up here, and I want to save this to here and here, and I think this is in here. And we're going to give it, you can see I've already created one before. I'm going to call it updated zoning. Okay, so I've updated zoning settings, so I'm going to call it updated zoning and go save. So with that, I've now created that layer file. If I look over here in my catalog window, there it is, an LYR file, right? So let's talk about how to use this. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start a new map document by going up here and clicking on the new button. Click that, use a blank map to start with. So the new map is in here, and I'm going to go ahead and use the updated zoning layer file that I just created to add the zoning layer to this new blank map that I've done. So I could go down here to the catalog window, drag and drop it in if I wanted to, or I can go up here to the add data button. However you are more comfortable with adding new layers to your map. So now traditionally you'd go in, go to your drive that has your data, or to your database connection. Go find that database, right? I'd go into here, there's the Tripville, there's the zoning feature class, and I'd hit add, right? I'd add it, it'd come in something like this, and then I'd have to go through all of those settings that I was doing before, including the symbology, to get this set up. But with the layer file, I'm going to go back up here to the add data button, navigate back to the folder where that layer file is saved to. And by the way, the layer file doesn't have to be in the same folder as the database. It can be anywhere as long as you have access to the data. You still have to be able to access the geodatabase or shapefile or whatever that has the data the layer references. So I'm going to select the updated zoning layer file here and click add. Okay. So notice it's now in the table of contents, and you're like, well, hold it, I don't see it. It's on the top, so it should be on top of the first zoning layer we added, the traditional way. Why don't I see it? Well, if you look up here at the box that's next to it that you use to turn the layer on and off, you'll see it's kind of grayed out and has a little rectangle with a dash underneath it. Well, that's because, remember, we set a scale range to the layer so it wouldn't show up if we were zoomed out beyond, what was it, 20,000, 24,000, I forget exactly what it was. So it's not going to show up because we're at 26,000. However, if I start to zoom in, actually zoom in, not zoom out, look, there it is, right? So I'm in at 15,000. It's now turned on. We can see it because that's the scale range. Zoom in a little further. Now we start to see the labels. They're not pretty because I didn't do a lot to make them pretty, but you see how they came on because now I'm at 10,000. So those scale ranges came across. If I go in and I open the properties for this layer now, let's go start at the general tab. You can see there's the description I typed in. There's the credits. There is that scale range we just demonstrated. Go to the source. Look, it's still pointing to, there's the Tripville_GIS geodatabase, and there's the zoning feature class, just like in the first map that we used to create the layer file, right? So it's still pointing to the same source. Our selection, the change when we select something, it'll be highlighted in red, is still there. Didn't make any changes to the display settings in the other map when we created the layer file, so there's no settings here. Symbology, again, we saw how all the symbology came across, just like in the other map. Fields, those 3 fields I turned off are turned off here. We didn't apply a definition query, so we don't have one here. Our label settings, right? There's the scale range we set. There's the field we picked. That's again a layer property that came across. We didn't have to configure it in this map. We didn't have any joins and relates or time settings, but the HTML pop-up was enabled and that came across. So you can see all of these layer properties came across by using the layer file to add the layer to the map, as opposed to just going to the feature class or shapefile like we probably traditionally do. But let's check out the feature templates. Did those settings come across as well? So I'm going to go back to my editor toolbar and start editing in this map. Turn on the Create Features window again. So there's that central business district that I had edited before. I'm going to go into properties for it. So look at there. There's the editor set to me. So that came across, right? The business district setting came across. So yes, the changes that I made to the feature templates also were stored in the layer file and came across into this new map. So all of the settings across the board came through by using the layer file, as opposed to having to recreate that all from scratch. So hopefully that can really help you see where this might save you time, where it would help standardize how layers look from one map to the other within your organization, regardless of who created it. So what I'm going to do now real quick, now that we've seen this here in ArcMap, I want to jump over into ArcGIS Pro and show you how the same functionality works in ArcPro. Okay, so I'm in ArcPro now, and I've got a layer here called the number of GISPs per state, right? So it's number of GIS certified professionals in all the United States, right? Broken down by each state which in the country. Okay, so I've got that configured, and again, I can go in and there's still the same properties. Now in ArcPro, how you access some of these properties are a little different. So for example, if I go select the layer, which is called states here in my contents pane, which is the same as the table of contents. And then I go up here to the ribbon to get to the appearance tab. Then this is where I'm going to go and configure my symbology. It's still a property of the layer. You're just going to get to these settings in a different location than you do in ArcMap. So I'd go in and configure my symbology here, just like I would in ArcMap. So I've already got that set up. I'm not going to change it. So you can see I'm using graduated colors based on the number. It's the field count by state. So that's the number of GISPs per state, and got the ranges here for each one of those. Okay, so those that are red have the most, and those that have blue have the least, and all the colors in between. Right, so we get that. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. If I want to control labeling, there's a labeling tab up here in the ribbon. So this is one place I can turn on and off my labels. Is this. I can choose the fields and build the expressions for labeling up here. This is where I'm going to set the scale ranges for that label, when it displays, when it doesn't display, what font is used, size, so on. I got some placement options here. So this is where I can go in and set up some basic labeling. There is another pane I'm not going to get into that allows you to get into putting halos and, you know, rotations, all that kind of good stuff. But we're not going to talk about that here. But this is basically where you start with labeling, is the labeling tab for a layer. And then data here is where you can get into adding fields to a table, creating subtypes, domains, and so on. If I want to turn on and off fields like I did before, I'm going to go onto here and go to the fields option. And this opens the table in what basically is a design view. And so here's the visibility. So again, if I don't want to see the object ID and shape fields, again, I'm just going to turn them off over here. If there's any other fields, because notice these also have like population values and whatnot. There's the GISP field, number of GISPs there. Anyway, I can turn on off fields here and then save them. Okay. All of these are layer properties. I'm going to go ahead and close this design view down so we're back to the main map. So appearance, labeling, and data are all layer properties. They're just not accessed in ArcPro the same way you did in ArcMap. Now, if I do right click on the layer in the contents pane and go down to properties, there is a layer properties window that will open up. Okay. So we're going to have, instead of tabs across the top, we've got the tabs on the side over here, right? So we do have a general, so we can give it a name. We can set scale ranges here, as well as up here in the appearance tab in the ribbon. If this is a layer that's being edited frequently by others, or you're pulling from the web, you can set an automatic refresh cycle so you can pick up any changes. Go in and set metadata. So this is where you put in description. So right, you put in summaries, whatever here. So this is similar to the general tab that was in ArcMap. So tags for searches, credits, anything that you want to put in there. So next we can go down to source. So this again tells me where the data is coming from. So you can see this is where that's coming from. It's the ArcGIS Pro demo.geo database. It's coming from the states feature class, which is a simple feature class. It's a polygon. It doesn't have any Z or M values. There is no feature binning applied to it. So you get a little bit more properties with your source here in ArcPro than you did in ArcMap. You can see the spatial reference, which is the coordinate system here as well, just like you saw in ArcMap. See the bounding extents and all these things. So again, just like in ArcMap, ArcPro, the layer points to data, right? So this layer references a specific feature class, and the layer controls how we're visualizing that specific feature class. And just like in ArcMap, any layer file I create in ArcPro that's associated with, or let me back that up. Any layer I create in ArcPro, layer file I create in ArcPro, there we go, is going to be associated with a specific layer that's in the map I create it with. And all of the source and all these other things are going to be included as part of that. If you want to use a layer file with a different feature class, you can do that with symbology, but you can't do it with anything else, right? All the other settings only apply to this layer that references this feature class. Okay, so we'll talk about that, or I'll show that to you in a second. Okay, but you can see in ArcPro we have a lot more. We have elevation, we still have the selection, we have display, which is a little bit cut down from what you had in ArcMap. A cache view, because ArcPro caches everything to improve performance. So we're not going to get into that. Definition queries, time, ranges, indexes, and so on. So all of these are properties of a layer in ArcPro. So there's more properties really in ArcPro than there are in ArcMap that you can control, right? But a layer file created in ArcPro will save all of these various settings here, right? As well as those settings that you do through these tabs up here. And then lastly, also, when I go to edit here and hit the create button here, that opens the create features pane over here, just like you had in ArcMap. And these are my feature templates. So each one of these is a feature template for this layer. And if I right click on it, I can go to properties. And again, I can configure properties for this specific template, right? If I have any of these that I want to change and make default values, I can do that here just like I can in ArcMap. You've seen me do it in ArcMap. I'm not going to mess with it here. But again, the feature templates here are associated with the layer, which means they're a property of this layer states over here. So those two are tied together. They're linked. So if any changes I make here, when I create my layer file here, it's going to save any changes I make to feature templates here, but they're going to be linked to that layer. Okay, so let me go up here, how do I create the layer file? If I right click on the layer, go down to sharing, there is save as layer file. You can do that. You can also go up here to the share tab in the ribbon and save as layer file here. So there's two ways to create the layer file. They do the same thing. It doesn't matter where you do it, whether you do it from here or by right clicking and sharing and save as layer file. Either one does the same thing. It's going to open the same tool, which is going to be the save layer as layer file, an LYRX file. That's a layer file for Arc Pro, as we said. So go here. Where do I want to save this to? We'll go to folders and I guess here. So, well, yeah, this will work. And I'm going to not call this states because I want to call it num_GISP, right? Go save. And so in Arc Pro, unlike ArcMap, I can have multiple maps in a single project. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new map. Or let's pick an existing one, right? So what I have here in map 1, so map, let's open a... So let's open this one. What's map 1 have in it? And if you want to know the differences between ArcGIS Pro and ArcMap or vice versa, I have another video dedicated to that comparison that you can see. Okay, so I've got this map here that I was working on for the city of Peachtree City for something. But anyway, I want to add that GISP layer to that map. So again, I can do it a couple of ways. I could go up here to the Add Data button, navigate to the folder I want it, that I saved it in. So where is it? There it is. I had to remember what I called it. Right, so I could add that here and click OK to add it. Or again, I can go to the catalog pane, which is like the catalog window, and go down to my folders, project folder, and go here. I could right click, add to current map, or I can drag it in and let it go. So I can drop and drag. And now as I zoom out a little bit, you can see it has added that map or that layer to this map. Now this isn't a different coordinate system than what that is. It doesn't matter. It projects on the fly. This map is in Georgia State Plain. This was originally in WGS 84. Again, doesn't matter. Arc Pro, ArcMap, they project data on the fly to match up. So now you can see it has added that layer to my map with all of the settings, right? You can see the symbology, you can see the labeling, right? Just like we saw before. So same principle applies. So there you have it. That's how we use layer files in ArcGIS Pro. As I said, you can see that the concept is very similar to ArcMap. The difference here really being that the number of properties you can configure for a given layer in Arc Pro is increased, and that the layer files you create in Arc Pro are not compatible with ArcMap. But let me go ahead and show you a layer file that was created in ArcMap and that it can indeed be brought into ArcGIS Pro. So I'm going to scroll down here in the catalog pane and find a layer file that was created in ArcMap. You can see it here. I've got these two that were created in ArcMap, and I know they were because they are LYR files. So I know by that file extension that it was created in ArcMap. So I'm going to just add that to this map. I honestly don't know exactly what these are, but we'll go ahead and add them. So I'm just going to right click and add to current map. Okay, brought it in, but I can't find the data file because of the red exclamation point. So that one wasn't a good one. I really ought to do a better job at preparing. So I'm going to remove that one and let's see if I can find another one in here. Yep, sewer layer. So again, another LYR file. I'm going to bring it in, add it to the current map. Notice it came in. All the symbology was defined for it. There's obviously a scale range that's been applied because it's not showing up and it's grayed out. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom to make that layer visible. So we've zoomed in. It is now starting to draw that layer. Zoom out a little bit more. Zoom me to the scale. It didn't actually zoom me to that location because I know this isn't in Missouri. So let's go zoom to layer. There we go. And zoom in a little more. And I'm going to turn, there it is, starting to come in. I'm going to turn off the GISP layer. But you can see there is the layer. It's ductile iron 8-inch. So the labeling came over. The symbology came over for the sewer lines, all of that. So all of those configurations that were done in ArcMap came over successfully into ArcGIS Pro using the old LYR style layer files. So there we go. Again, now you've seen layer files in action. Hopefully you can see how this will really help you save time, standardize things, make your life easier, right? When you're using whether ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, it really doesn't matter. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope you have found it to be informative and that you've maybe learned a thing or two that you didn't know before. We appreciate your support, and if you have ideas for other videos you'd like to see or whatnot, please leave those in the comments below. If you saw anything that I did that maybe you didn't get or was wrong, please also leave that in the comments. We appreciate any feedback you can provide. It really helps us plan what videos we're going to put up on the channel and whatnot going forward. So please do that. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the little notification bell so as we do post new videos that you will get notified when those come out. So you'll see our content as it's coming up. Hey, if there's anything we can do to help you out, if your organization needs help implementing enterprise GIS solutions, integrating your GIS with other systems like work order management or inspections or whatnot, we can certainly help you with that. If you're trying to figure out, well, how do I implement GIS? What do I need to consider? How much software? All that kind of thing. We can help you do a needs assessment or set up a strategic plan to kind of think through steps on how do you grow or expand your GIS over, a 3 to 5 year period. Maybe you need some help. Maybe you don't have any GIS staff, or if you got a big project ramping up and you need some extra help, we can provide you with some Rent-A-Tech services. So please reach out for that. And of course, training and support. So if you need a safety net, you don't want to sit on hold for a long time with Esri. Not to say anything bad about Esri Tech Support. They're wonderful. But, we can be there as a safety net as well. Talk immediately to our certified professionals that really know this stuff inside and out. So with that, reach out to us. Here's our website, www.egisassociates.com. Give us a call at 678-710-9710. Or shoot us an email at info@egisassociates.com. So with that, again, hope you've enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.